From Performance to Embodiment, a Robyn Reads reflection. I recently facilitated a session for a room full of Vistage chairs on the craft of coaching in one-to-one conversations. It was one of those opportunities that made complete sense on paper. Coaching is my specialism after all. I've spent years developing my craft, and one-to-one conversations sit at the heart of my work with senior decision makers. Still, in the days before the session, I could feel the familiar pull of performance. I had my slide deck, I had my facilitator notes, 2 stories I wanted to land well, key messages I cared deeply about, including the importance of restraint, curiosity, trust, silence, and the courage to stop being the answer in the room. This time, though, I prepared differently. Rather than memorizing every word, I recorded myself talking through the session. I listened back, again and again. I wasn't trying to learn a script. I was learning the rhythm, the emotional shape, the thread that connected it all. Then I delivered it. Inside, it felt imperfect. My mouth went dry. I forgot some of what I'd planned to say. I moved between sections sooner than I'd intended. At one point, I realised I'd skipped the open debrief completely, so I simply brought it back in later. Inside my own head, I was noticing every imperfection, but externally, in the room, something very different was happening. The feedback afterwards was generous, consistent, and if I'm honest, slightly disorientating. People described me as calm, confident, in flow. One person said there'd been no sign of anxiety. Another commented on the pace, on the way that I held silence. Then a colleague who's known me for the 8 years I've been chairing said something I'll probably remember for a very long time. She told me that a session I delivered 2 years ago had felt like I was performing someone else's script, even though she knew I had written it. This time, she said, it felt like Robyn, on stage, doing Robyn. She had named something I'd been trying to understand for years, because I think many experienced leaders spend years accumulating capability before they fully trust it. We build the knowledge, we gather experience, develop instincts. We learn from mistakes, from stretch assignments, from public moments and private doubts, and the steady friction of real responsibility. And yet, when the stakes rise, many of us default back to performance. The irony is that the harder we try to prove our expertise, the further away from it we can sometimes feel. That was certainly true for me. I used to prepare by writing too much, memorising too much, holding too tightly to the version I'd rehearsed. The moment I lost a sentence, my internal alarm would sound. This time, I had prepared thoroughly, as I always do, but I had prepared the thinking rather than the performance, and that distinction changed everything. Performance can look polished from the outside, but from the inside it can be exhausting, because part of our attention turns inward. We're monitoring ourselves, wondering how we're sounding, whether the point landed, trying to remember what comes next. We're no longer completely with the room because we're busy managing ourselves. And leaders experience this everywhere, in board meetings, presentations, difficult conversations, leading change, pitching for investment even. The pressure to be impressive can interrupt the very presence people need from us. Looking back, the strongest moments in that session certainly weren't the perfectly worded ones. They were the moments I responded in real time, trusted the silence, made an observation I hadn't planned, and allowed the room to find its own insight. There's a useful idea from psychology that helps explain this. As we practice a skill over time, our competence becomes embodied. It stops living only in our thinking. Our experience, our instincts, our body, our language all begin working together. Research into embodied cognition suggests that learning isn't held only in the mind. It's shaped by what we do, what we observe, and the environments we experience. I think that helps explain something many leaders secretly struggle with. We can be more capable than we feel. Our competence may already be present in the room, while our self-perception is still trying to catch up. Because here's the thing, the audience rarely experiences our full internal weather system. They experience our impact. That was my lesson. I was measuring myself against the words I'd forgotten. Everyone else was measuring the experience they had had. I had been assessing execution. They were responding to presence. The biggest shift wasn't that I became less prepared. It was that I prepared in a way that allowed me to trust myself. I learned the beginning, the middle, the end, the stories, the turning points, the questions that mattered. That gave me enough structure to stay on track and enough freedom to stay alive to the room. I think that's deeply relevant to leadership. There are moments that demand careful preparation, evidence, structure, technical excellence. But there are also moments when the preparation has to become so integrated that we stop holding the notes and start holding the space. People rarely need us to be word perfect. They need us to be present enough to respond to what's actually happening. That's when expertise becomes embodied. It stops being something we're trying to demonstrate and becomes something we simply inhabit. Something softens when we stop trying so hard to prove ourselves. We listen differently, we notice more, we recover more quickly when things don't go to plan. We also become easier to trust because there's a particular kind of authority that comes from presence rather than performance. It doesn't need to dominate the room, or fill every silence, or land every sentence perfectly. It simply knows why it's there. The experience has stayed with me, and I suspect many leaders recognise this. We can be more ready than we feel. We can have earned our place before our confidence fully believes it. We can spend years gathering expertise and still need one moment, one room, one piece of feedback to realise it has become part of us. Perhaps the work isn't always about becoming more impressive. Sometimes the work is learning to stop performing what we already are. We still prepare, but we prepare in service of presence rather than protection. We learn the shape, we hold the thread, we trust the room and the work and ourselves. Perhaps that's when expertise finally starts to feel like our own, not because we've become someone different, but because we've finally stopped performing who we have been all along.
If this story stayed with you, you'll find more reflections at robertsonfox.com. Until next time, thank you for listening.